technology. Okay, hopefully I'll be able to hear you with the new technology. So, first of all, I'm the Mayor of Worcester and I'd like to thank everybody for coming to the meeting and welcome you all. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on the proceedings. Please note, this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page on the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is on the High Street, opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So, I will now welcome my co-chaplain, Reverend Rosie Moss, and invite her to offer prayers before the commencement of the formal meeting of the Council.
In the present world climate, I'd just like to say to you, thank you. Thank you that we are gathered here today. I also want to say thank you for life itself, for the measure of health that we need to fulfil our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honour of bearing appropriate responsibilities. I'd like to give thanks for the work of those who are coming to the end of their term of office, and thanks too for the work of this council as it meets for the last time before the City Council elections. But mostly I'd like to give thanks for the freedom to embrace or the freedom to reject ideas and proposals which are put forward without fear of persecution and retribution. And so I come to the subject which is on all our hearts. If you're not a praying person, perhaps you'd just like to think some thoughts while I say these words. I pray for the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia, for their countries and their leaders. I pray for all those who are afraid, that they feel supported in this time of great fear. Pray for all those who have the power over life and death, that they will choose for all people life, and life in all its fullness. Pray for those who choose war, that they will work to seek for peace. And I pray for leaders on the world stage, that they are inspired to give wisdom and courage. And above all today, I pray for peace. Amen.
Amen. Okay, can I have some apologies for absence, please?
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Andy Roberts, Councillor Nida Hassan and Councillor Marjorie Bissett, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. I will now ask for if any members have any declarations of interest. Councillor Udall and Councillor Alta.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I declare an interest on the third notice of motion, Worcester stands with Ukraine. After seeking legal advice, I will remain and speak and vote, but it's due to some business links. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, I'll do this side first. Councillor Ria.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As a landlord, and the second motion for cost of living.
Councillor Gregson.
Same as Councillor Riaz, Mayor.
Councillor Alta.
Declaring interest on motion 7 has been a landlord for several properties in Worcester.
Thank you. Anybody else have missed off? Councillor Ditter.
Similar, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, one more. Councillor Stephen.
I'm also a landlord in Worcester.
Thank you. And Councillor Stanley?
Again, Mr Mayor, as the other councillors have indicated for that motion.
Thank you. Haven't seen any more. Okay then. Can we agree the minutes of the two council meetings we had on the 22nd of February 2022 are a true, accurate record? Okay, thank you very much. I will now deliver the Mayor's communication. First of all, a reminder that the Mayor's banquet takes place on Friday the 29th of April 2022 here at the Guildhall. Please support this special event. Tickets are available from Jill Priest, and I know we've all been working hard behind the scenes to make sure we got them good quality raffle prizes. We've got them excellent Prosecco being served. That should be a really, really good night. So please come. Secondly, the Queen's Green Canopy. As you're aware, we are one of the select Queen's Green Canopy cities, and also I happen to work for one of their corporate sponsors, and I'm also of course as an employee of that. So therefore next Tuesday on the 5th of April at 1:30 I'll be planting a tree at Waitrose on London Road to support this. I will be joined by children from the Nunnery Wood High School for this event. Next thing is, on the 9th of May, there will be a memorial service to celebrate the life of former Mayor Jeff Carpenter, and this will take place in the Cathedral. All members have been sent to invitation, and if they wish to attend, they need to respond directly to the family so they're aware of numbers. I would also like to pay tribute to those councillors who are retiring in May and therefore attending their last meeting of the council tonight, namely Bill Amos, Tom Collins, Mike Johnson, Louise Griffiths and Joe Hodges. Bill Amos was first elected at a by-election in May 2017 following the resignation of Councillor David Wilkinson. He retained his seat for the Bedwetine ward on the following year. He's been a stalwart of the Environment Committee since its inception and also served the last 4 years as a member of the Planning Committee. Tom Collins became a councillor in 2018 as a member for Rainbow Hill ward. He sat on both the Communities and the Environment Committee for the whole of his time here, and last year he was appointed Vice Chair of the Environment Committee. Louise Griffiths was elected at the same time as Tom, representing the Battenhall ward. Just 12 months, she became Vice Chair of Licensing and Environmental Health Committee, and then last May became the first ever Chair of the newly established Health and Wellbeing Committee. Joe Hodges has the longest record of our retiring councillors. Joe was born in Worcester and has lived in the city all her life. She first joined Worcester City Council in 1996 and has represented the Warden for her entire 26 years here, initially for Holy Trinity Ward, then Warden. She's a trustee of the Worcester Community Trust and also president of the Worcester Twinning Association. She's been mayor twice, first in 1999 to 2000 and then again in 2020-21 when she became the first ever mayor of Worcester to be elected at a virtual meeting. Finally, Mike Johnson, who was first elected to represent St Peter's Ward in 2014. He has fulfilled a wide range of roles, including Cabinet Member for Sport, Leisure and Retail, and the first ever Chair of the Communities Committee, and most recently Chair of the Planning Committee. I would also like to thank Jim Carver for his time and commitment as Councillor for the Nunnery Ward, who resigned last month. Before I move on, I'd like to first of all invite Councillor Bayliss, then Councillor Gregson to pay their own tribute. Then I will invite the retiring councillors to reply. So, Councillor Bayliss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's always sad to say goodbye to people who have served this council and have done so with distinction. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to Councillor Bill Amos, who, as you have said, has served 5 years. It's never easy to join this council on a by-election, and Bill came in quite unexpectedly and joined us, and then had to fight again the following year for his seat. Bill I would describe Bill as steadfast, resolute. I mean, he's a person you can truly depend on. He has been a stalwart member of the Planning Committee over recent years. When Bill makes a contribution, you really sit up and listen, and I will certainly miss him. He is a true friend, and I wish him well. He has moved to the Malvern Hills district, and a lovely part of the country it is too, and I'm sure he will enjoy his time there, and I really do wish him the very best of luck. Councillor Mike Johnson has served this authority for over 8 years. Mike has been a cabinet member back in the day. He played an important part in the development and completion of the swimming pool, and I consider that to be a real feather in anybody's cap. Mike served again as chairman of the Communities Committee in its first guise as first chairman, and has come back in the last year to serve as chairman of the Planning Committee. Never an easy job. Never an easy job to find that right balance and to make sure that everybody feels they get their say. It's a really difficult and challenging job. Mike, many people will also know, Mike also resides in the Malvern Hills district area now. He's been a passionate advocate for the people of St Peters. He's served previously on the parish council, and continues to represent and to do his very utmost for the people of St Peters. And I wish him and his wife continued success and happiness. Louise leaves us today, having served the council for 4 years. As you said, she was within a year elected as vice chairman of licensing, a role that she was very passionate for, and took great gusto. I know from the committee section she was an absolute stalwart member for licensing subcommittees, which are always difficult to find people to serve on in the middle of the day. And Louise was there and willing to serve on those and to chair those. Sometimes they are not difficult meetings. They are difficult meetings to gain the right balance. And I wish her the very best and thank her for her contribution there. Over the last year, she's also been the inaugural chair of the Health and Wellbeing Committee and has played a really key part, along with Councillor Lynn Denham, in steering the work of that committee over its first year. Louise is a passionate champion for her causes, particularly things such as active travel, where she has helped guide the work of this council. She's tenacious. She has moved away from the city. She's moved to Wychavon, and I just wanted to wish her all the very best in her future too. And to thank her on behalf of the people of Battenhall for her contribution. Jim Carver, as you said, resigned recently. It was short but sweet, but Jim made a contribution in the time he was with us. His work has taken him away from Worcester, and it is typical of the man that he didn't want to do the job if he couldn't devote 100% of his time to it. I wish him all the very best in his new endeavours, as I said when he left. Finally, I'd like to pay thank you to the two Labour members who are leaving us. Tom Collins, who's done 4 years with the council. I have enjoyed locking horns with you, Tom. I know you to be a thoughtful, considerate and compassionate person who wants to do the right thing. I'm sorry, so on occasion we haven't always agreed, but I thank you for your contribution, and on behalf of the people of Worcester for your dedication. And Joe is it really is a master of this council. 26 years, she has done it all, including being mayor twice. I wasn't on the council, in Joe's first mayor of Sea, so I never got to see it. But apart from, and then Joe had the very difficult task of chairing this council during the COVID year. Nearly an entire year was lost in terms of events and activities, but Joe still made a huge contribution to the city in that year. I'm always impressed by people who know the Constitution and who chair the meeting as it should be done, and Joe did that, I think, exemplary. And I hope I hope her and Dave have a long and happy retirement away from the council. I did get the opportunity to meet more of Joe's family at the very end of her mayoral year. I can see what a force Jo is within her family and how much she is loved by her family. And I hope that she has many years with them after leaving this authority. So on behalf of the Conservative Group, I'd like to thank all of those who are leaving the council and wish them well in the future.
Thank you very much for that, and I invite Councillor Gregson for his set of tribute.
Thanks, Mayor. I must say I'm taken by the number of people who are retiring to the Malvern Hills. I hope that they will stay in touch with people who live there already and carrying on the council. I'm sure the councillor can make that what he will. I would just like to acknowledge the work that Louise has pushed over her time on the council in licensing, certainly when we've worked on some task and finish work there, and in particular on the health and wellbeing agenda, which I think in establishing a committee means that we have got some real opportunity to take health and wellbeing and activities forward as a council. Mike, I've known basis through his interest in heritage and culture, and certainly appreciate that work, particularly through the Joint Museums Committee and his support for the museum and the city's heritage. And I think that I would certainly wish Bill Amos well. He's often been overshadowed by his louder neighbour, but I understand that there's a dynasty behind them, so maybe that will not all be lost. Tom Collins came to us in the Labour group and in the Labour Party, a young, idealistic, enthusiastic young man, and he goes a shadow of Tom's been really instrumental, I think, in waking a lot of us up to environmental and energy issues in particular, and a lot of that, of course, comes from his work, and in part it's his success at work and his success with his young family that take him away from us. And I do hope sincerely that he will be able to come back at some point in the future and share his experience with us again. As I say, his promotion to Vice Chair of Environment was entirely on merit, and we will miss his sharp observations. Joe has been on the council almost as long as I have, and so it does feel a particular hole in people's lives when somebody like that goes. You've heard her career, if you like, her council career. We also know her, of course, as a school teacher, and on occasion she demonstrates that ability. And also, it was as a result of her career, of course, that we knew never to contact her during school holidays. Or, amazingly, once she retired, it seemed to get even more busy during holidays for some reason. So it's been, it's been entertaining, really, to manage somebody who's so committed to the city, who is so steeped in its history, not only her but her family. And I think we all know that Jo's family plays a really important part in her life, and they are very supportive of her and have been supportive of all she's done in in return. And Dave, who is a very long-suffering Newcastle United fan, deserves a lot of credit for that. Joe's work it can't be summed up in short sentences, but I think in particular in her commitment to play, to the local community, to planning, and to the city's heritage, through the Twinning Association, I think especially, is really something that not only will we miss, but we'll also need to build on and try and replace in some way in the future. And she leaves a very important legacy in all those areas. So thank you very much, Joe, for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much for those contributions. Any retiring members want to add to their leaders' testimonials? Yes, Councillor Bill Amos.
I would just like to thank those of my constituents who voted for me and gave me this very privileged opportunity to serve the city. I've been very proud and honoured to be elected and been able to serve for the last 5 years. It's been a real pleasure. It's given me an insight into local politics and how they work and how things operate to make the city efficient and make it as pleasant as it actually is. I would also like to say that I've enjoyed working with every member on this council that I've had the privilege to work with, regardless of political colours, regardless of differences. It's been an honour to work with you all, and I thank you for the honour and the privilege of working. And all I can say now is that it's time for me to stand down and hand the family baton over to my elder brother. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Call the next one in turn alphabetically, so I will call Councillor Tom Collins.
And I'd like to also thank Mark and Adrian for their kind words. I'd like to thank the residents of Rainbow Hill for putting their faith in me, and also my councillor colleagues. I've enjoyed working with Adrian, who's a compassionate, wise and dependable co-councillor in our ward. I've enjoyed working with the Labour group, who I'd say were a diverse group of characters, all of whom are passionate. And members across this chamber, I've enjoyed working with all of you. Thank you. Also the officers, who I think have shown remarkable patience with me and who have all been outstanding in their dedication, diligence and professionalism. I'm very proud of this council and the organisation that it heads. I think it is an outstanding council, and it's made by its staff. And this council helps to create a city that really does warrant its accolades as a place that people like to live. I will miss all of you who I've worked with. I came into politics because I wanted to see it done differently. To see the best in those who disagree with us, and to start with where we agree, then to disagree well, arguing to learn rather than to win. And I have seen this, and I'm proud that we achieve it. I also hope to see empathy and compassion practiced in politics, and this takes effort. And on that note, I'd like to take the opportunity to pay tribute to one of our number who was lost during my term, Councillor Stuart Denley Maxwell, who I served on Communities Committee, whose values I really admired and who I miss. Finally, I wish this chamber well, and although I will remain a member of this community, if not a member of this council. And I ask that you do persevere in pursuing a better politics, a more collaborative approach that simply works better. And to see each person in our city living and treated with dignity and respect in a way that we would like to be treated ourselves in their position. But finally, I just want to say thank you to you all, and I'll be seeing you around.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to call Councillor Louise Griffith.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say thank you to the residents of Batton Hall for voting for me, but probably biggest of all, thank you to Louis for getting me elected. Obviously, I left the Green Group after a year, and I have to say, now that this is my last council meeting, it was probably the biggest mistake I've ever made, if I'm truly honest. I'm now sitting with a group who I share very little in common with ideologically and who I find myself disagreeing with far more often than not. Over the past year, it has got increasingly more difficult to sit with this group, and I found myself on the edge, either not coming to full council meetings, watching them from home, or sitting here quietly not wanting to say anything. But what I have experienced over the past couple of months, and particularly at the last council meeting, was watching people on this council, usually women, get bullied for standing as an MP candidate, get bullied for wanting air quality sensors, not just once, twice at least in this council, yeah. And I think it's really awful. Tom, you've spoken about politics with compassion, and obviously you're a far more positive person than I am, because I don't see very much compassion in politics in this council chamber. What I see is a bit of a benevolent dictatorship, and I'm very glad to be leaving it. I have enjoyed my time here immensely. I've really enjoyed working with Richard on licensing and with Lynn on health and wellbeing. I think we've achieved some good stuff, maybe not so much with licensing, but certainly with health and wellbeing. Active travel and child poverty is high up on the agenda now, but to be honest, I am very pessimistic about the way things are going. I think we are about to see a lot more poverty in this city, and there's very little that either this council or the government are doing to help alleviate that. So, good luck to you all, I suppose. I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon, but I have enjoyed working with most of you immensely.
Okay, can I call Councillor Jo Hodges next?
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words from Mark and Adrian. Sometimes you don't recognise yourself. As you can imagine, saying goodbye to Worcester City Council this evening feels really strange after 26 years during which it's been part of my life and work. A few thank yous. Firstly, to the people of Warndon, who've consistently put their faith in me to represent them and to do my best for them. I've always tried to help, not always reaching an outcome which they wanted or thought was right, but that's how it works. Thank you to the Labour Party, who chose me to be a candidate and gave me the opportunity to be elected as a councillor and to become mayor of the city on 2 occasions and to serve on this council for 26 years. Thank you to my Labour colleagues here in the group now and from previous years. I've made some really good friends over the years, which I value. Thank you to all members of the council from all parties and to the officers too. You make up the body that challenges and enacts decisions for the good of the people in Worcester. It's a big responsibility, and I'm sure that you all realise that and realise how important it is. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time on Worcester City Council, and I hope that I've made some differences for the good to some people's lives. I've enjoyed working with you all, members and officers, even if I've not agreed with you all the time. I think I've got on with the majority of people I've come into contact with, and those that I haven't, well, you can't win them all. I wish you all good health and success in running Worcester City Council. I'll be avidly reading the Worcester News to find out what decisions you're making and probably disagreeing with quite a lot of them. But thank you all and goodbye.
And when I had the original script for this, it said, finally Mike Johnson, so it's finally Mike Johnson.
Finally it is. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank you all for the kind words that have been spoken this evening. I've enjoyed my time representing St Peter's. not only individually for those residents I've dealt with, but also to represent them on the various committees that I've sat on. I suppose the most testing things I've done are really around county, would you believe? I've spent 8 years on HOSC because my career in health followed me and forced me up there. And I'm still not convinced on occasions that Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee actually understands how the health service works. But yeah, it's a lost cause. And I've spent the last 4 years, and it's unfortunate that the chair isn't here of the Corporate Parenting Board, learning a lot about how corporate parenting works. And it's not an area that I'd been exposed to before. So I've been educated in that respect. Coming back to the city, I'll miss much, but not all of the city's dealings, which probably won't surprise you. And I regretted in a way that the cabinet system went. I was amazed when Simon, in only my second year, said, would you like to be cabinet member for sport, leisure and retail, which I really enjoyed, and it was a great time because of the swimming pool development. I've been thinking about resigning, having got to my 7th year, and as some of you may know, I've had a bit of a health scare, and that sort of crystallised my thoughts and made that decision in some respects for me. I'd like to thank all those members and officers, and in particular chairs and vice chairs I've worked with. And finally, you are not completely free of me, because it was known that I was going to stand down. I sat on a committee that established the Worcestershire Heritage Art and Museum Committee as a charity, and I'm now becoming one of the trustees of that. But thank you all for your time.
I would like to thank you all for those interesting and quite revealing comments you've all given. When this meeting is over, you're invited to join me for refreshment in the lower hall. This is my last full council meeting as mayor before I hand over the next one. It means that the last time you'll be able to enjoy Lucy's cake and munch into my delicious cheese. So please make sure you come downstairs. And now the next thing is I need to invite our public participation. We do have one public speaker tonight, Karen Field, who wishes to support the motion on sunflower for the Ukraine, and I would invite Karen to address the council. Karen, you have 5 minutes. And the chairman of the committee, she will prompt you as you get nearer your time limit. So the microphone's yours.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much for letting me speak here this evening. I'm speaking on behalf... Oh, should I sit down? Sorry, I'll start again. So I said thank you very much for letting me speak here this evening. I'm speaking on behalf of the motion that Adrian is going to put forward later. I know that everyone in Worcester is really moved by the war in Ukraine and the terrible and shocking suffering that it's causing, especially in places like Mariupol. And it's really inspiring to see the Ukrainian flag in Worcester and on top of the Malverns, I think. And I hear that the Guildhall's been in support of Ukraine. I would like us to extend this show of support by planting Worcester with a blaze of sunflowers. Sunflowers in the parks, meadows, in other public spaces, in schools, on roadside verges, pub gardens, people's front gardens. You may already know that sunflowers are Ukrainian's national flower, and the sunflower symbolises peace. The blue and yellow flag mimics the vibrant colour of sunflowers against a clear blue sky, and sunflowers have grown in Ukraine since the 1700s. Sunflower oil became an important aspect of daily life in the country because the church didn't ban it during Lent. Sunflower oil is a staple in Ukrainian households, and sunflowers make up a huge chunk of the Ukrainian economy, with Ukraine being one of the major suppliers of sunflower oil. I think that if Ukrainian people already living here in Worcester or refugees from the war who settle in Worcester can see Worcester in summer as a sea of sunflowers, it'll send a message that we here are warmly welcoming them to our city and we're standing in solidarity with them. The sunflowers can provide a connection to their homeland when it's so far away and provide some comfort and some beauty when they must be so traumatised and disorientated. I can't really imagine what it must be like to have so brutally lost your home and be forced to locate to a completely different country where everything looks and feels so unfamiliar and strange. But seeing the sunflowers will perhaps offer some hope and familiarity and a reminder that your country is still there and you'll return one day. They'll act as a sign that the people of Worcester are welcoming to refugees from Ukraine and are happy to support them. And I hope the refugees here from other parts of the world will also feel this welcome. I've read that some news outlets are already reporting there's a drop in interest in items about the war, and so the sunflowers will serve to make us remember the war is ongoing, and as time goes on, people are still suffering and continue to need our help. And even if the fighting stops, Ukraine will need help with rebuilding. I'm aware it's a gesture, but sunflowers are inexpensive and they're easy to grow, and there's something that everyone in Worcester could be involved with if they'd like to. I believe that many other parts of the country are planting sunflowers as well, so we'll be part of something bigger, we'll be part of a national initiative. And we could possibly source it by buying the seeds from a company like the Moreland Flower Company in Devon, which is selling sunflower seeds to support the Red Cross Ukrainian appeal. And finally, it's not the first time that sunflowers have been used to encourage peace. In June 1996, in a ceremony to mark Ukraine giving up nuclear weapons, US and Russian and Ukrainian defense ministers planted sunflowers at Ukraine's Pervomaisk missile base. So we will be continuing a noble tradition. I've prepared some earlier envelopes with sunflower seeds, and I'd be happy if you would take an envelope with you to start planting the sunflower seeds as part of this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Karen. I will now go on to the next item on the agenda, which are questions to the Council, and we received one from Councillor Mel Alcott. So can I ask Mel to ask her question, please?
Chair, thank you. Yeah, the question is as read, please.
Know what it is.
Sorry, just bear with me. Apologies. Yep, with COVID cases on the rise in Worcestershire, with the county rate 10% higher than the country average, will this council work with Worcestershire County Council to facilitate availability of free lateral flow tests for Worcester residents? Thank you.
Councillor Bayless.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got some information which I hope Council will find helpful. Over 2 billion lateral flow tests have been provided across the UK since 2020. As immunity levels have increased through the national vaccination programme, testing and isolation will play a less important role in preventing serious disease. The spring round of booster vaccines has commenced, the fourth opportunity for vaccination, and it is now very clear that this is the most effective form of protection against the virus. The Council will be at the heart of that effort, continuing with pop-up vaccination centres across the city to make it easier for people to get their jab. Worcestershire, throughout the pandemic, recognised nationally as an area that has got on with rolling out vaccination swiftly, with generally very good levels of uptake. Those initially able to take up the spring booster will be those aged 75 years and older, residents in care homes, other older people, and those aged 12 years and over with a weakened immunity. This will extend to all those over 50 by this autumn. From the 1st of April, there will continue to be free testing for the over 75s, care home residents and hospital patients, and those over 12 with weakened immunity systems, recognising these groups as being at risk of becoming particularly poorly if contracting COVID-19. Final guidance on the provision of lateral flow tests will be published very soon, and this will clarify the exact detail.
Thank you. Councillor Alcott, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Gov.uk details that between the 22nd and the 28th of March, there have been 9,417 tests in Worcester. This shows an increase of 1.8% compared to the previous 7 days. And between the 23rd and the 29th of March, 1,007 people have confirmed a positive test, which shows an increase of 15.1% compared to the previous 7 days, which is high. I note that Portsmouth City Council are funding free lateral flow tests through the COVID Management Outbreak Fund, and they estimate they will be able to supply 5 lateral flow tests per household per month between March to June. Can we not do something similar for our Worcester residents?
Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to put this on the agenda of the next Worcestershire Leaders Board and to seek the guidance of the Director of Public Health at the County Council, who is the sort of lead specialist in this area, and see what she or he recommends at that point. So happy to take it forward, but can't give a guarantee at this point, but happy to raise the issue with a lead professional.
Thank you very much. That's the only question for tonight. We'll now move on to the next item, which is item 7, which is notice for motion. We will consider any motion that has been submitted in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 8. So the first one is on the increase of cost of living, which is going to be proposed by Councillor Lamb and is going to be seconded by Councillor Norfolk. And I know one of my list of speakers is Councillor Lewing. So if you can make myself aware during the debate of any of the people who want to speak, I will now ask Councillor Matt Lamb to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a correction, it's going to be Pat Agar who's going to be seconding the motion. Okay, thank you
very much.
I'll read the motion out for the benefit of those who are listening. Council is concerned about the growing inequalities being caused by the recent dramatic increase in the cost of living. These put the people of Worcester at greater risk of being unable to afford the basics that we take for granted: heating our homes, paying for our housing, feeding our families and getting to work. Council therefore mandates the Managing Director to write to the local Member of Parliament, highlighting our concerns and seeking his support to tackle this crisis through a cap on private sector housing rents and to cut VAT on domestic fuel. Both of these measures would, if implemented, reduce the impact of the cost of living crisis on those most at need. And I wish to formally propose this motion and encourage Council to support it. Like many councillors, I spend a lot of my time talking to residents about their problems and concerns. And many of these are very important, but very, very local. You know, litter, speeding, antisocial behaviour and so on. But one national issue that's really come up on the doorstep an awful lot, I've been surprised how much it's come up, has been this cost of living crisis. And as the motion states, you know, the people of Worcester are finding it hard to afford the basics. The Office for Business Responsibility forecasts that the British people will see the biggest fall in living standards since records began in 1956. And contributing to this is the fact that the tax burden is going to rise to the highest level in more than 70 years. And the message finally seems to be getting through to the government, who made some, what I believe are half-hearted moves towards tackling the cost of living crisis in the spring statement. However, it was simply not enough. And my motion particularly talks about growing inequalities, because this party, the Labour Party, has always been the party of equality and fairness. And as ever, the cost of living crisis will impact those most who can afford it the least. The Resolution Foundation analysed the proposed changes announced by Rishi Sunak and found that a further 1.3 million Britons, including 500,000 children, are going to be pulled into poverty next year. There is particular concern about the real-term cuts in benefits. They are due to rise next month, but only by 3.1%, well below inflation, which currently sits at 6.2% and is projected to reach almost 10% by the end of the year. My motion proposes two practical solutions to this problem. The first solution is a cap on private sector housing rents. And this would mirror the limits on raising rent in the social housing sector, where rents can only increase by CPI. We know that private sector rents are currently too high for many people. This is because we are building not enough of the right kind of affordable housing or investing sufficiently in our social housing sector. With inflation rising, leading to real-term cuts in pay, people in Worcester can neither afford to get on the property ladder, nor can they afford the increasing rents that they face. It's a sobering fact that court proceedings to evict tenants in England due to default are up 43% this year. A cap on rent is already being considered in Bristol, but would require central government to grant local authorities the power either permanently or on a pilot basis. At the moment, private landlords can increase rent whenever they want, as long as the tenancy is not for a fixed term. Landlords must give notice to increase rents, but there is nothing to stop them kicking a tenant out if they don't agree. So-called hard rent controls can limit the amount that landlords can charge and would immediately make housing more affordable. My alternative is to allow landlords to increase rents, but only by a set amount, linked to inflation. This would bring private rents into line with social housing rents. This is a policy which is used with success in countries such as France, Ireland, Canada, and Germany. The fact is that we've moved from one of the most regulated private renting sectors in the world to having the most uncontrolled system anywhere. Having gone from one extreme to the other, we should be trying to find modern, sustainable methods to preventing rent spiralling out of families' reach. The second solution to the cost of living crisis is for a VAT cut on energy bills, which have seen a dramatic increase. In 2015, and I remember it very clearly, Labour was lambasted for suggesting that a cap on gas and electricity prices was a practical suggestion. However, the party opposite soon pinched that idea when they discovered that free market does not always operate to everyone's benefit. This month, Ofgem announced that the energy price cap, and therefore what people will end up paying, will rise by £694 or 54%. This is an enormous increase. An additional 1.5 million homes will be pushed into fuel poverty, which disproportionately affects poorer households. The West Midlands is one of the two regions with the highest rates. Last week, the managing director of Iceland said that food bank users were turning down raw food since they have no money to pay for the energy to cook it. Labour has already proposed a tax on North Sea oil and gas companies to pay for a reduction in VAT, which would save households at least £200 off their bills, with up to £600 in total for those who need it most, including pensioners and the lowest earners. North Sea oil and gas companies have benefited enormously from increased prices, which have been passed on to their shareholders through increased dividends. It is perfectly fair to expect them to help reduce the burden on the most vulnerable in society. Whilst events in Ukraine have had an impact on energy prices, rising energy prices are also the result of dither, delay and poor planning in Britain's energy section since 2010. Not enough has been done to use the potential of renewable energy. Storage capacity has been slashed. There's been a failure to make more homes warm and well insulated, and the failure to properly regulate the energy market has led to dozens of energy companies going bust. This proposal would go some way to helping the most vulnerable in society afford to heat and light their homes. The fact is that the rising cost of essentials affects us all, but not equally. People on the lowest incomes are at greatest risk because unavoidable spending on energy, food and housing takes up a high proportion of their budget than any other group. They already have nothing to cut back on. I therefore call upon Council to support this motion.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Agar to second the motion?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor. This week, the Worcester News reported that nearly a third of children worry about their family not having enough to live on comfortably as the cost of living crisis deepens, and there will be a lot of children who go hungry as a result or go without some of the necessities of life, and certainly affording a family laptop for homework is likely to be out of reach. In houses with an income of less than £20,000, 47% of children worried about family finances. I think that should worry us all, basically. As you've already heard, the Office for Budget Responsibility has said that we are facing the biggest drop in living standards since the 1950s. Living costs for the poorest households will rise by at least 10% because they need to spend more of their budgets on utilities at a time when the energy price cap has risen by 54%. Imagine, if you will, what that means in a city where the lower quartile income is less than £21,000. Imagine the desperation, perhaps, of living on universal credit when your work doesn't pay enough to stay afloat, and a lot of workers need universal credit as well. Yes, there is a little help from government via this council, but it's strictly one-off payments that we're talking about, and they don't provide any future security, really. And if debt causes people to lose their homes, help could be quite limited, because across South Worcestershire, we have a considerable shortage of affordable homes. And there are 4,000 people currently on the waiting list in Worcester alone. Official figures show that there's a 43% rise in evictions across the country in December. At the same time, the Chancellor has announced more tax increases in 2 years than Gordon Brown did in a decade. In other words, the Conservatives are now the party of high taxes. I think the point for me is that you can't put up fuel prices, and you can't put up utilities prices, and you can't raise taxes and cut the £20 weekly uplift in universal credit all at the same time and not expect serious consequences from all of that. Now, you may argue that the state benefits are due to go up by 3% next month, so they are, but in June inflation will be 8%. Effectively, this amounts to a £10 billion cut in benefits. There's no use saying that Putin is to blame for all of our economic woes. The cost of living was already rising before the invasion of Ukraine. Whatever the balance of blame, people still need to heat their homes, pay for housing and feed their families. I wonder what would help them to do this. Well, if we're asking this council for a cap on private sector housing rents and a cut to VAT on domestic fuel, and the reasons in statistics, I suppose, that we're doing this, if you live and work in Worcester and want to rent somewhere to live in the city, you'll need an income of £22,549 to afford a so-called affordable market rent property. The average lower income is well below that at £20,748. A median market rent property would cost quite a bit more, and you would need to earn £31,632 per annum for such a property. These are the stark realities, and these are the reasons why we're asking you to support this motion. Renting in Worcester really isn't affordable for anyone on a middle and lower or a lower income. It's really up to us to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Can I now ask Councillor Louis to speak? Councillor Louis Stephen.
Thank you. I would like to suggest an amendment to this motion. Basically, what I would like to suggest is that the motion is as written, except that we delete everything after the word rents. So to remove and to cut VAT on domestic fuel. I'm very sympathetic to the aims of this motion. Many people are having to choose between heating and eating. And most concerning is that we have a very large rise in both relative and also absolute poverty levels in this country. We have no issue with the proposals on rent controls. We would support those. But unfortunately, there are many ways that you could use the money you could raise from taxing oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. Unfortunately, reducing VAT is not the best way of doing what you're proposing to do, in our opinion. And this is really for very obvious reasons, that if you have a small property with, say, a fuel bill of, say, £3,000 a year on your fuel bill, 5% VAT tax on that is £150 that they will be saving. But if you have a mansion, a very large mansion, and it's a swimming pool, they might have a fuel bill of maybe £30,000, and a 5% reduction in their bill is going to give them a saving of about £1,500. So unfortunately, what this does, this motion, is actually disproportionately favours those with very rich people who have got very large gas bills and electricity bills. And a far better way of doing this would actually be to do a fixed sum of, pick a figure, let's say, for example, £400, and that would be disproportionately a much higher benefit to somebody on a very low income compared to somebody who is living in a mansion and so on. So on that basis, that's the proposal I'd like to propose a change in the wording of the motion.
Okay, thank you very much. I know Councillor Bayliss wants to come in on the debate, but before I do that, does this amendment have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Louis, Councillor Neil Lawrenson.
Yeah, just formally seconding the motion, reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Okay, then, in that case, then we're going to first of all have a discussion on this amendment. So, Mark Bayliss, do you want to speak on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the point that Councillor Stevens makes shows how difficult this is and how simple solutions don't always appear to actually deliver the outcome that you want. So I have an amendment too, which we'll get to in time, but I'm happy to support Councillor Stevens' amendment to eat that bit after rent and to move that and fully support that. I do give notice, however, that I have an amendment of my own I'd like to make after this one.
Okay, as a point of procedure, we'll debate this amendment first, and then once we've done that, we'll then move on to your amendment. So, Councillor Webner.
That's me. Yeah, just to respond to the amendment. I mean, I welcome that you support the principle. That's absolutely brilliant. And one of the things we both agree on, which I think is also good, is that you feel the gas and the oil companies should pay something towards alleviating this crisis. I think what we slightly disagree on is, how the money should be spent and how it should be allocated. And it's an interesting thing about VAT. And we can have a big debate about VAT all night actually, and Boris Johnson himself called it a blunt instrument, didn't he? And I remember during the Brexit referenda, Boris Johnson said, that the VAT was unfair and damaging, it's regressive. So I look forward to him proposing abolishing it, but I haven't heard anything from the Prime Minister about that yet. But what I would say is the proposal I put forward is fully costed. Okay, it's fully costed, and also I think it does actually give more money to the most needy. So based on that it is, as Mark said, these things are always very difficult, but this is fully costed, this proposal. The costing of your proposal, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. So I personally would urge people to reject the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any further speakers on the amendment?
No, Councillor Alcott.
Yeah, Councillor Alcott.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we absolutely need to do something in principle, and there was the opportunity with the spring statement for government to do something and to tax the record profits that the utility companies have been making, and they're clearly not interested in this. So I just think we need to do something now. We need to make a start. If we could just cut VAT on fuel prices now and work out something better in the future perhaps, but I just think we need to act now, and there are limited options available, so I will not be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further speakers on this particular part of the debate? If there aren't, can I ask Councillor Stephen to sum up the amendment?
Thank you. So I acknowledge that it's a fully costed proposal, and I fully acknowledge that. But I'm afraid that mathematically, I think the facts remain that if you take that sum and divide it by the number of households in this country, and you give a fixed sum, then those things will be far better off than those on high incomes or larger properties. So I'm afraid mathematically I don't agree with you. To respond to the point raised by Councillor Alcott, that it's an easy thing to do. Yes, it would be an easy thing to do, is to reduce VAT. But as already demonstrated by the Conservative government, they've already given an allowance of £150 on the council tax. As much as it pains me to say that, acknowledge that that's something that they've done, they could do that but just do it more. So instead of being £150, it could be £400 or whatever. So having a fixed sum is the right thing to do in principle, because it gives those on lowest incomes the highest amount of money. So I agree with everything you've said, fully acknowledge it, but I just think it's about the way that you do it. And I think that from an environmental point of view and from a practical point of view, there are better ways of doing it, and I think doing a fixed sum, using the same money that you'd be raising, to as a fixed element, would be far more effective.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask Claire Chapman to take this vote on this amendment. This is just the amended motion. That's all it is. The debate will continue after this debate, after this vote. So, Claire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All those voting for the amendment, please raise your hand. All those voting against the amendment? Any abstentions? The amendment is lost. It's 15 for and 11, 12 for. Yeah, 16 for, sorry. 8 against.
16 for.
Apologies, yes. Sorry.
So what's the vote?
The amendment is.
Amendment has been carried. Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll now ask Councillor Bayliss now to put, I suppose, an amendment on the amended motion. This could be
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, as Councillor Stevens showed, this issue is one that all parties recognise, and much of of the comments that were made by the original mover of the motion, I agree with. This is a significant and serious issue for the people of Britain, and it is something that I think all parties in this country are committed to doing something about. I mean, I'd like to move an amendment that recognises the government has already done a lot in this space. In the spring statement, £9.1 billion additional support. And I'd like to make a recognition of that. But I also think that the change, the recommended course of action, is very limited and too limited. I think there are a whole range of other things that this government, any government, can do. And so I'd like to make that clear as well. So I'd like us to come together and send a message to our Member of Parliament that more is needed and we need to continue to focus on this. But I don't think it should just be limited to relatively small issues in terms of, we've dealt with the one's gone, VAT on fuel bills. Well, that's not in this motion now, we've tackled that. I think, so my amendment would be in two parts. At the end of the first sentence, it says, at the moment the sentence says, Council is concerned about the growing inequalities being caused by the recent dramatic increase in the cost of living. And I'd like to add, although it welcomes the government's investment support through the £150 council tax rebate, increasing national insurance thresholds, and the £144 million discretionary support to local authorities. That's the first part. And then it changes it and deletes everything after the word crisis and says and adds the full range of policy levers at the government's disposal. So it would now read, that final bit says, Council therefore mandates the Managing Director to write to the local Member of Parliament, highlighting the concerns and seeking his support to help tackle the crisis through the full range of policy levers at the government's disposal. And why do I want that? Because, as I said, rent controls in the private sector are just one method. I'd like to see more than that. I'd like to see further action in a whole range of parts of government policy. And I think that we should be asking and encouraging our Member of Parliament to say to the government that we want to see action in a whole range. And so I hope that the original mover will recognise this in the spirit in which it's meant, which is that this is a real issue that we all recognise needs more action on, and that we need to work together to achieve that. So I hope that that's non-controversial.
Thank you. Can I have a second for the amendment? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Second, I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more? Speak. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think we've made progress, to be fair. I wasn't going to die in a ditch over the VAT one. As long as we're giving money to the poorest in society, I think that's great. Different methods, but I'll accept that. I have to say, I don't accept this amendment, to be honest with you. And it's interesting, actually, because it shows the sort of the schizophrenia within the Conservative Party. It really does. And I suspect the leader of the council, before he takes over from Robin Walker, he has to... He will quite possibly, Councillor Mitchell, more chance than you of getting elected to county council, perhaps. But anyway, but anyway, moving swiftly on. But the trouble with the Conservative Party is it does seem to be in this sort of schizophrenic moment, because on the one hand you have the Chancellor who says, well, look, this government cannot do everything, you know, on the one hand, and then obviously Boris Johnson says we need to do more. So it's kind of interventionist or free market, Thatcherite or One Nation, I'm not quite sure. But to be honest with you, you know, I don't think people do think the government has done enough. I really don't think. You know, YouGov, which is obviously owned by a Conservative donor, reported that 69% of people didn't think the Chancellor did enough to address the looming cost of living crisis. You know, 66% of people said the measures announced did not help people like them much. So I don't think people do recognise what has been done. And obviously what is also recognised is the increase in the national insurance threshold, a promised cut to income tax by 2024, I cannot obviously guess why it's going to be in 2024, and scrapping VAT on heat pumps and home insulation, taxes are still going to be higher than ever before. You know, the 5p fuel duty cuts takes prices that you pay for petrol back to a week ago. Okay, and you know the Chancellor, it's a conjuring act of which Paul Daniels himself would be proud. He's giving back only 1/6 of with one hand that he took away with the other. And you know it's not surprising. Somebody said this, and I know this is not acceptable to some people, that more and more voters now trust the Labour Party on the economy and taxation and the Tories because of this kind of thing going on. The additional £500 million for the Household Support Fund is a drop in the ocean in terms of addressing the scale of need amongst the most financially vulnerable households. And even the Daily Express, now, I don't quote the Daily Express very much, of all papers proclaimed last week, the forgotten millions say, what about us, protesting at less than nothing for the old. You know, state pensions will increase by only 3.1%, whereas, as we know, inflation is going to be almost in double figures. And the Centre for Social Justice, founded by Ian Duncan Smith, of all people, highlighted the lack of help for the poorest families. And to be honest with you, recognition, nobody's fooled by Rishi Sunak's Man of the People Act. This is someone who uses somebody else's modest car for a photo opportunity, cannot use contactless because he's never had to use it before, and he has a range of different breads, whereas I've got one loaf at my house. So it just goes, I'm not going to recognise it because it simply isn't enough.
Okay, any more speakers on this amendment? If they're not, I will ask Councillor Bayliss to reply.
I always enjoy listening to Councillor Lamb. He's a great orator, and a would-be parliamentarian himself. But you always know when he's in trouble, when you end up with a scattergun approach. I mean, he's just like flak thrown in the air. I'm saying, and I think he said it himself, one thing isn't enough. There's quite a lot more to be done here. So my amendment to this was simply to reflect two things. One, that government started. Well done to the government for doing something, but there's more to do. And instead of just one area where it needs to be done, there is a whole range of things. And I'm saying that our letter to the Member of Parliament should say that there's a range of policy levers here, and you should be using the whole range of them. All the clubs. We remember the famous one-club golfer and all that. Matt, as a historian, will remember the analogy. We should be using all of those in order to put this right. So that's why I'm also seeking to make this non-partisan. We can all agree it. We think there's more to do, and there's many things and ways in which the government should do it. So I'm hoping that there still will be some sensible people who will support this.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll now put the amendment to the vote. So, Claire, do you want to? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All those voting for the amendment, please raise your hand. Those voting against the amendment. The amendment is lost.
Okay, we'll now go back to the previous motion, which is now the main motion, which is the motion as written down on the order paper, excluding the word about cutting VAT on domestic fuel. So any speakers on that?
Go to the vote.
I think what we'll do, because of time, unless Councillor Lamb agrees, we'll put this to the vote, shall we? Okay, we'll put this motion to the vote now. So all those in favour of the first amended on this motion. So all those in... So Claire, do you want to carry it?
All those voting for the motion as amended, please raise your hand. All those voting against? Abstentions? The motion is carried.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll now move on to the second motion, which is the one that our public speaker spoke about earlier on sunflowers. So I'm going to ask Councillor Adrian Gregson to propose this. I don't have a list of a seconder, so I'm going to ask Councillor Stanley to second it. So Councillor Gregson to propose it, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just slightly disorientated then because I thought I'd got a seconder, but that's fine. Whoever wants to second it's fine. The motion is on the basis of the words you heard earlier by our public speaker, and there's a small but visible sign of welcome and hope. The Council requests that sunflowers, the national flower of Ukraine, be planted in the city's parks, wildflower meadows, and members of the public be encouraged by the City Council to plant sunflowers in their gardens. There is obviously a gesture of solidarity and significance that lies with this message. And despite the fact that very often we're told that this council should not interfere in national politics or international politics, I think that we all do agree that this is a different situation, and we do have a role to comment in this particular crisis, because we actually do have a direct engagement and involvement with current Ukrainians in the city, with other Eastern Europeans in the city whose homelands border Russia, and indeed with those Russians who live within the city who are watching what is going on in the name of their country from afar. And I don't presume to judge what they think about that, but they obviously must have concerns about their own friends and families. So as a council, we will, I'm sure, do all we can to support any refugee system which is proves to be effective, and we have track record in that in the city and the county in recent years, with particularly during the Syrian crisis. Of course, a crisis caused by the same individual who is currently leading this war on the Ukraine. So I suppose that my point is that it is a gesture, but it's not gesture politics. It is a sign that is backed up by action, and I think that some of those actions that we hope to be able to commit to are contained in the following motion. And so I would recommend the Council support this statement and encourage others to follow suit.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley to second.
Mr Mayor, thank you. There are occasions when gestures are important in life and politics, and I am delighted to second this particular motion. It's absolutely right that this council should offer the warmest possible welcome to Ukrainian refugees, victims of the most barbaric invasion of their homeland. The sunflower is a most potent symbol of a better tomorrow, and being seen in significant numbers around the city would send a strong signal that we stand together with the Ukrainian people. And I commend this to Council.
Do you have any further speakers on this? Yes. Yeah, Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say that I absolutely support this motion. I think it's a really wonderful idea. In the Arboretum, Councillor Barnes and I are very lucky with some very supportive residents. And during lockdown, we had some residents growing sunflowers to help cheer people up. And they have said they'll be extremely happy to support the initiative with growing even more sunflowers and even putting in some artwork around our ward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm, again, fully in support of this, and sometimes I think rituals or symbolism are overlooked in terms of their effect on the ability to make change. And anyone who knows the Johnson & Scholes cultural web model will know that rituals and symbolism are one of those changes that affect shifting the paradigm. So if this goes one way and moving one of those 6 cogs, then it's going in the right direction. So I fully support this.
Okay. Any other speakers? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I thank the Speaker for the seeds, because in St Peter's, my ward, we have the Friends of St Peter's Parks, and I will ensure that they go to the organisers of that and ask that they be planted as the very symbol that's been requested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Lucy Hodgson.
Just one thing, I hope that Veg are also getting on board as well, Paul Snooks and his volunteers, because we can certainly crikey, it certainly can be yeah, anyway.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? If they're not, I'll ask Claire to put this to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All those voting in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. The motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We'll now go on to the third motion of the evening, which is again on Ukraine. Worcester City stands with Ukraine, which can be proposed by Councillor Olcott. And do we have a seconder for this? Yes, Councillor Gregson. Okay, so Councillor Olcott.
Excuse me, Mayor, on a point of order, I need to declare an interest as a recipient of the pension.
The other way around, is it?
No, I need to declare an interest as a recipient of the pension.
Okay, fine, yeah. Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder for this? Yeah, Councillor Agar, okay. Okay, so Councillor Olcott to move the motion.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, this motion, it's looking to do two things essentially. It's looking for the council to reach out to Ukrainians in the community and to also to work with charitable community and religious organisations to support those displaced. And the other thing it's looking to do is to ensure we effectively target Russian political and financial interest as best we're able to on a city basis, and also to request more action is taken on the county and a national basis. And in addition to doing those, I guess, two simple but effective things, I would also like, the motion is there to recognise the importance of global security and our NATO allies, and I'd just like to give those a mention. But obviously we've all seen, it's been over a month now, and we've seen every day that the true horrors of what's happening in Ukraine. And whilst President Zelensky was looking at peace talks yesterday, I think we're a long way off that, but I know we're a very welcoming council and city, and I just hope you can all support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Agar to second it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will say very little because I was taken slightly by surprise at the time, but I think you will notice that I'm wearing the colours of Ukraine on my lapel, thanks to the crafting skills of my fellow councillor Simon Cronin. And of course, the yellow does represent the sunflowers. I know it's a bit of a surprise to you, isn't it? Was to me too. But as you say, Councillor Mitchell, symbols matter. We have, thankfully, more than a symbol here. I'm hoping very much that councillors will support this motion because it urges us to action. And I think those of us who've been at the sharp end of NATO forces, as I have, as other councillors have, will understand the need for defence and the need to support global security as best we can. So thank you. I hope you will support.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this? Councillor Griffith.
It's my support for a number of reasons, but mainly because the people of Ukraine need help, and we're in a position as a nation and as part of NATO to be able to provide that assistance. I think some members in supporting this because their national policies and it also for PD 210 and 430, you will see support to and cease export of defence products, which I'm sure puts them in a difficult position. However, I think the ability to provide that support to Ukraine, particularly from a military perspective, is essential, and we've seen what he's doing to the exceptionally brave individuals in the Ukraine Army and Reserves, which I take my hat off if I wore a hat to, without a shadow of doubt. I will just, so that we'll for lethal military weapons, by adding the word defensive, it means weapon used to defend. So just so we're clear on that, because they are offensive weapons. I know, because I used to make a few of them. But anyway, it gets my full support, and again, publicly I'd like to state my admiration for the people of Ukraine, whether they be in uniform or not, for what they're putting up with and winning, which is amazing.
Thank you. Councillor Louise Griffith and then Councillor Adrian Gregson.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to put on record my support for this motion. As most of you know, my family I come from refugees. My grandmother is from Ukraine, though it was Poland when she was living there. So I'm very much in support of this. We have also welcomed we will be welcoming a Ukrainian family into our home in the very near future. And I think it's really, really important that the council puts on record our support for Ukrainian refugees, but not just Ukrainian refugees, all refugees. We do have a significant refugee community living here in Worcester from other conflicts, Syria and Afghanistan in particular. So I think it's really important that we recognise those as well. So very much in support of this motion.
Thank you. And Councillor Adrian Gregson.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't want to get into our national politics about this motion. It's more important than that. And I also think that I don't understand the practicalities of providing assistance to Ukrainian refugees or indeed sometimes other refugees. But it does feel from the various reports you read in the national media that there are some issues in the way in which the scheme to assist refugees from this conflict is being applied or could be applied or interpreted. And I think that while I support everything that's in here, and I don't want to make any further amendment and add to it, I do hope that we take every opportunity we can to put our message as a council back to the county council and our colleagues in other district councils, because no doubt, we are working on a partnership basis for Worcestershire on this one, that we need to be clear about where those systems work and where there are potential for people to fall through the net, what the issues are about funding, and making sure that the resources are applied properly and accurately. And I'm sure that our officers are doing that, but I just want to make that public request that we do make sure that whatever happens, those refugees who want to come to this country are able to do so in a safe and secure manner.
Thank you. Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I clearly and obviously support this motion. I just rise in order to give that assurance, really, to Councillor Gregson that, you know, in my role, working with the Chief Executive, we will part of a Worcestershire-wide approach, working with the County Council and with the other districts, to provide a very welcoming approach to anybody who wants to come here, and to support those who are offering accommodation to them. So yeah, together it is an evolving picture. It's you know it's a war zone. It's difficult. It's complex. But yeah, I'm absolutely happy to, and I'm sure I have the full support of this council in doing that. So I'm happy to give that assurance that that is what officers are set to do.
Thank you. If there's no more speakers, can I ask Councillor Alcott to sum the debate up, please?
Chair, thank you. Yeah, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for their support, and obviously it's such an important issue, and it's clearly cross-party. Just thank you.
Thank you. Claire, do you want to take it to the vote?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. All those voting in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Just turn the page over. We are now moving on to our referral reports from the various committees. So the first one is agenda item 8.1, which is from Policy and Resources. So I'll ask Councillor Bayliss to report on the capital and investment strategies.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The capital strategy was considered by the Policy and Resources Committee and through to a slight administrative area. The investment strategy didn't make it to the committee, and therefore I requested it obviously be considered and agreed by the council, but I do recommend it for you tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Gregson.
One second.
There be no more speakers. I will ask Claire to put this to the vote.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. All those voting in favour of the motion? Thank you. The motion is carried.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to the second referral report, item 8.2, which is the appointment of a member champion for equality, diversity and inclusion. So who's going to propose this? Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This matter came again before Policy and Resources, and the policy was recommended there. I believe there is a nomination for the post of Equality Diversity Champion. I understand it is Councillor Robin Norfolk. I'm happy to support that nomination.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Gregson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would like to second that proposal for Robin Norfolk to be the member champion, and in doing so really welcome this strategy. It's been a long time since we first talked about things like disabled access to this building, but a lot of work has been done in a very short time by our corporate director, so thank you for that. And I hope that we can now move forward with some alacrity on these issues.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further speakers? Yes, Councillor Hodges, and then I think we'll have Councillor Norfolk after that.
Thank you. I wouldn't normally speak on something that's referred from another committee, particularly when it's a committee that I'm a member of. But because I've had COVID recently, I wasn't able to attend that particular meeting. And I just wanted to say how much I welcome the appointment of this champion, and how really, if we're honest with ourselves, it's long overdue. This should have been done quite a long time ago. And so thank you very much to the officers who've put this together and put this forward. On the topic of disabled access, we still can't get into the council chamber. We have no disabled access into the council chamber, so it's about time we were able to actually get there. I know that there's a disabled access out here, but if you've actually seen someone who's in a wheelchair trying to come down there, they do actually shoot down that and straight across the landing, and it's never, I wouldn't have regarded that as safe. But I do really welcome the appointment of this champion.
Thank you very much, and for that example. And Councillor Robin Norfolk.
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, I'd like to thank Sian's hard work in putting this strategy together and presenting it to Council. It is long overdue. I must admit, when I first got interested in local politics, the LGA were complaining about the lack of representation of the minority communities in councils across the country, not just this council, although this council has done splendidly in relation to some of the minorities that live in our community. So again, thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for the nomination. There's nothing about me that makes me better qualified than any other councillor to be the Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion champion, but I will do my best to make sure that we live up to the aims of the strategy, which is to tackle inequality, challenge discrimination, promote inclusion and celebrate diversity, which will help the council to achieve its vision of the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If there are no further ones, Councillor Bailey, do you wish to sum up?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Claire, can we put this to the vote?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So all those voting in favour of the appointment of a member champion for equality, diversity, inclusion, being Councillor Robin Norfolk, please raise your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I formally move the recommendation from the Audit and Governance Committee.
Thank you. And Councillor Barnes, second.
Formally seconded, sir.
And are there any further speakers? Okay, Claire, do you want to put it to the vote?
All those voting in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried.
Thank you very much. We will now have two reports now from our various member champions. If members can keep the salient point of their reports and that, and there'll be an opportunity for members to ask questions afterwards. So the first one is to ask Councillor Lucy Hodgson to present her report as Heritage Champion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep this brief. I'm sure you've all read my report. As you can see, we've one of the largest concentration of listed building within the country. Well over 1,000 listed buildings here in the city, and also a number of scheduled monuments and other things. And we also have a heritage at risk register as well as the national register. But it's also not just buildings. We've also heritage around Royal Worcester, music and the Three Choirs Festival, the Elgar Festival, and also we shouldn't forget the River Severn and the recently opened up of the fish passes, which will allow the thwaite shad to spawn again upriver. English Heritage encourages local authorities to appoint a heritage champion, and usually from an elected member. And certainly before James Dinn retired and COVID and home working was introduced, I used to attend meetings along with the officers of this council and also Heritage England, where we where we discussed the various heritage matters in the city, as well as planning issues, and also the number of conservation areas as well around the city. And because of COVID and remote working, I've been unable to help to get any updates recently, but I have been informed about any heritage updates around the SWDP review as an ongoing, as part of I have, in the last 6 months, seen the fine restoration of the old convent school and the new Mountbatten Hall retirement village. And only last week, I was able to visit the old fire station and view one of the flats that have been converted. I am now going to, now that COVID is ending and remote working is ending, I will be meeting the Corporate Director of Planning and Governments about every 3 months to catch up on heritage of the city. I also hopefully will attend meetings now with Historic England, and also get an annual update from officers as to the state of heritage at risk, both nationally and locally, as well as other. So the museum service to get update around the proposed relocation of the Worcester Soldier Museum, and also the proposed refurbishment of the Museum and Art Gallery, and also through particularly PED and other, it's the sort of the redevelopment of the cultural quarter around Angel Place, and also other township funds and that sort of thing. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I've got Councillor Gregson and then Councillor Barnes. So Councillor Gregson first.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Working on the basis that the Heritage Champion is an advocate, somebody who works over and above what is actually written down in there as a normal councillor. I just wondered, in reference to 2.11, why, given that everybody else has managed remote working, why you've not been able to do that. I wondered if you could confirm in paragraph 212 that the visits to Mountbatten Hall and the fire station were actually as Mayoress rather than as invited as Heritage Champion. I wondered why in 213 you waited until COVID, so that between 2015 and 2020 you have not met on every 3 months with the Corporate Director of Planning in order to find out what's going on. I wondered in relation to 214, the Heritage at Risk Register.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Planning
Point of
committee
order, Mr.
anyway.
Mayor. A point of order. Comments should be addressed to the Mayor. They should not be personal, and they should not be as barbed and aggressive as the leader of the Labour group is making. He should be making the comments to you, sir, not to the member directly across the chamber.
I reject that point of order, Mayor, on the basis that the champion is there to be questioned.
You are
not the Mayor,
you are
not
not
the
there
leader.
to rule on points of order. You are not there to rule on points of order. My point of order is to the Mayor. You are not Mayor. Yes.
Okay, just point to me. Are those your points? And I will give Councillor Hodgson, Lucy Hodgson, the opportunity to reply.
Let me try and put it more shortly. I'm not trying to be aggressive. I'm trying to point out. I'm trying to ask what it is that has actually been done as Heritage Champion since 2015 on all these things, and I can't see it in this report, Mayor.
Councillor Lucy Hodgson.
Thank you, Councillor Gregson. between 2015 and James Dinn's retirement, I actually met with him at least probably 3 or 4 times a year, and his offices around conservation and that sort of thing. So I felt that I also spoke with the Heritage Planning Officer as well. Yes, in COVID, I perhaps didn't do as well as I could, and yes, I had a stroke last year, and therefore really, probably about 9 months of the year, I probably was not very well, but I think I have managed okay. Yes, and yes, I was mayoress around the time, so the visits to the convent school and the fire station was around being the mayoress, but certainly at the both at the fire station and at the convent, I also was there as the heritage champion, and I think from 2014 onwards, you'll see that I'm now going to hold offices to account, and I think certainly I feel that this report that I wrote, not officers, I think I have explained myself fully.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes, then Councillor Lorrington.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been attending the Conservation Advisory Panel for the last year, and it's a really fascinating panel to be able to attend. I don't have voting rights or anything like that, but the expertise that is then passed on to the planning officers, I think, is invaluable. I have been embarrassed by the fact that I've been asked more than once why the heritage champion is not attending and even not giving apologies for 4 years. So during the time of COVID, we were able to go to Zoom meetings, so everybody else has been able to attend. The heritage champion has not been involved for 4 years on a really important panel, and I'd like to know whether she will be attending in the future. Well, firstly, I haven't been. I've attended probably about once every 6 months over the last 4 years. I'm sorry, but I have. And I will certainly, when I can be, I will attend, but obviously I have got other meetings as well.
Councillor Lorrington, then Councillor Hodges.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't going to contribute. That's my catchphrase. I just wanted to applaud the way that Councillor Hodgson dealt with that barrage. Just if it had been me on the receiving end, I would have been in tears and would have left the room. So would ask councillors to be mindful of the way that they put across their objections. We can all disagree, but the manner in which we disagree is really important. So thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I wouldn't have had your strength in that moment, so thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Hodges.
Thank you. Can I assure everyone that my question is not aggressive, and I am addressing you, Mr. Mayor, but the heritage champion through you. I'm looking at 2.9. It's a very thorough account of the heritage that is going on in Worcester City. That's lovely. Down to 2.9, it says the whole point of the Heritage Champion is to promote all aspects of heritage and historic environment within the council area. I'd like to know what the Heritage Champion has done since 2015 to promote heritage in Worcester City.
Okay. Councillor Hodgson.
I think recognising this that through the council, the heritage of the city, the heritage around festivals, around communities, and all of that as well. In my sort of life on the council as well, I think I have represented the council. I'm sorry, but I can't actually at this present time actually recognise anything particular.
Councillor Udall, Councillor Bailiff. Nope. Councillor Bailiff.
Mr. Mayor, may I say, I think this is a rather disgusting personal insult attack on Councillor Hodgson tonight. In a spirit of trying to assist you, sir, we have only recently formalised the role of a champion and the feedback to this. So to ask, well, what were you doing before we understood the role, and we have now a feedback mechanism which comes to council, I think is also, if anybody who's been on this council for a number of years doesn't know that Councillor Mrs. Hodgson is a hard-working, dedicated member of this authority who puts forward the best interests of this council in all that she does, whether that has been as mayor, mayoress, a member of the cabinet, or as a committee chair. I think I'd call upon members to have a bit of decorum and just recognise. Lucy has had a very difficult 18 months, and I think a barrage of negativity when other people are not subjected to the same level of questioning, I just think demeans those who are asking it, rather than Councillor Hodgson, who were there trying to do that too.
What I will say is these member champions are volunteers from the council membership. People volunteer in their time. They don't get paid any extra allowance for it in order to do this particular role. And I think that if we do start getting this sort of degree of questioning, it is going to put people off from doing these particular roles and thinking, well, I'm interested in this, but I don't particularly want to be, attacked because somebody in the chamber thinks they can do the job better, therefore they're going to attack me now. So what I would say is members should really think about when they ask questions for information, but not ask questions to sort of criticise and think somebody hadn't done the job or not, when in fact the job they probably think they should be doing probably doesn't actually exist as such and was never sort of in the original remit in that. That's what I would say on this. So if we can move to the next one now and ask for Councillor Lamb to give his report for children and young people.
Sorry, Chair, I did indicate to speak to ask a question. I do think the Leader of the Council does protest a little bit too much. This is the only opportunity members have got to ask other members questions and to hold them to account. And the Leader of the Council and his members should not be afraid of scrutiny. However, I do have a very legitimate question for the member champion.
Mr. Mayor, can I move next business? Because I think you've proposed that we move, and I think it's a good move to move on, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, I've got a question for the member concerned. Is it that actually asking questions, but you're not going to prepare to hear them?
Mr. Mayor, I've asked to move next business because I think it's in the county interest.
Give Councillor Udall a chance to ask a question, but because I recognise you, and but you didn't stand up to actually ask the question. The meeting is now moved on now.
Mr. Mayor, my question is, I received a telephone call tonight from a member of the public seeking information on how a property in Worcester, a very important property in St John's, could actually be listed. This member of the public pointed out there is very little information on the City Council website how to achieve this. I know it's not necessarily our responsibility, but has the member champion ever investigated our website with the eyes of a Worcester resident to examine to see how difficult it is to actually...
That's not a question for the Heritage Champion on a night like this.
No. I don't think this is really the... Children, young people.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. People's champion, and it was a great honour. I mean, I've worked in education. I worked with young people for 25 years now, so it was a great honour to be appointed the first children and young people's of the City of Worcester, and from 0 up to the ages of 18, and also a number of the key sort of levers when it and laying the hands of county and sort of voluntary sector organisations as well. So there's a lot of partnership working here, but at the heart of the role, as I've interpreted, lies these very important concepts of child poverty, youth unemployment and employment, and especially young people's well-being, which is incredibly important, and making sure that these issues are considered by the council in everything it does. And just some highlights. I mean, obviously, one of the first things we did is to publicise this new role. So with the help of officers, we wrote to all local schools and local colleges. We wrote to a number of different children and youth groups across the city, and indeed anyone who had an involvement in working with children and young people, to basically say, yeah, I was happy to go and meet them and talk to them and listen to them. And we've also set up a website, a dedicated children and young people's website, which the link is there. Please have a look. If there's anything there you feel we should be dealing with, please let me know. We'll get that added on. And there's a dedicated email address as well, so people can contact me. But I think the most rewarding part of the role has been, reaching out, meeting people who provide services for young people, and also talking to young people themselves, and it's quite interesting, we're used to being grilled in this council, but I have quite a few grillings from young people themselves when I've visited schools and youth groups, and it's been fascinating to listen to them. And just some sort of highlights, really. One of the first visits I did in the role was meeting representatives of the British Association of Social Workers. And one of the things that came out, and this came out a number of times, is the huge rise in mental health, mental health issues, anxiety, which was always there, but it's been made far worse by COVID. And I see this in my normal role, obviously working in a college on a day-to-day basis. But also one of the things that came out of meeting the British Association of Social Workers is the massive impact that deprivation and homelessness has on young people. I was humbled, and I have to use that word, I was humbled to visit Perrifield's Prue, and that was inspirational, absolutely amazing what I saw there. Working with young people, with behavioural issues, but also reaching into local schools and trying to prevent it reaching them, because obviously they have a very small number of students there because it's so intense, it's so sort of labour intensive, staff working with young people, so reaching out into the community. But again, one of the things they highlighted, mental health, anxiety, and also the unfairness of the funding, which obviously was discussed in a motion to this council literally a few months ago. I met representatives from the heart of Worcestershire, so I went from primary school, 1 minute, and then the next month I was talking to people in FE, which is an area I'm obviously very familiar with. But again, mental health, anxiety, CAMS, and also, you know, the issues that young people deal with, you know, that when you get to our age, you know, you just lose track, you know, massive issues about safeguarding, you know, sexual harassment, emotional well-being, the dealing with the kind of social media elements of young people's lives. I met with the police and Kelvin James and his team, and they are always talking about having a positive relationship with young people, not seeing young people gathering in a field or in a green space as a threat, but they want their own space, they engage with them, they talk to them. You know, and also helping to protect them from sexual exploitation, from drug abuse, from county lines, from knife crime. And again, you know, a rise in some OC social behaviour because of COVID, because of the closure of youth clubs. The Rivers Trust School was really interesting, or the Rivers School Trust was interesting, which was a multi-academy trust made up of 15 primary schools. And one of the things they said, which was interesting, is they showed some frustration at they didn't always understand who had the responsibility. Was it city council or was it county council? They had a particular issue and they couldn't quite pin down who was responsible. So sometimes having a schematic about who is responsible for what is really important. They talked a lot about holiday provision, and they holiday provision is absolutely great, but they would like such provision to be more mobile, to reach out to those more hard to reach communities. And they also said, and this was repeated in a school visit I did only yesterday morning, was that a lot of our sort of holiday provision is focused on sports. And sports isn't for everyone. You know, when I was a kid, I wasn't particularly sporty, to be honest with you. And so, you know, sort of looking into things like arts and culture and music, you know, reaching out and providing a service there for young people was something that they were particularly sort of keen on. I visited Nunnery Wood High School and met with their student parliament, and that was fascinating. And again, those young people enjoyed using a variety of council services such as leisure centres, skate parks, play areas and green spaces. They expressed views about pollution and congestion. Young people are obviously very, very environmentally aware. The loss of green spaces was something that they expressed as well. And again, they seem very resilient, but again, issues of depression, anxiety, identity, you know, were expressed. And obviously I've been attending meetings of the Children and Young People Strategic Partnership and also the Get Smart Strategic Group as well. And obviously the council itself has obviously been helping provide services. You know, so when we were setting the freedom, leisure, fees and charges, we've made concessions available to sort of independent looked after children and looked after children. We've worked with Worcester Sixth Form College and Nunnery Wood High School to ensure safeguarding is where it should be at the Nunnery Wood Leisure Centre. And obviously I and other people such as Richard have been long advocates of additional free tennis within the city to help young people get into those kind of sporting activities. The Worcestershire Health and Wellbeing Strategy, which is going to be really focused on those key issues of mental health and well-being, which is so important. There's a document out there already. It's got a consultation with a closing date of the 4th of May. And I would urge all members to read that strategy and please attend the upcoming members briefing session, which is going to be next Tuesday, the 5th of April at 7 p.m. So please attend that. There's also, of course, the big strategic play area development plan, which everyone has a really big interest. And again, that's a key opportunity to ensure that all young people across the city, you know, have access to good quality play and recreational provision. Obviously, recovery from COVID and dealing with the fallout from that for young people is going to be a big issue in the next few years. And under 6.2, you know, it was mentioned earlier on, you know, Mike Johnson's standing down at the next election. He will be standing down in terms of the Worcestershire Corporate Parenting Board. And, you know, if the council decided at May that they'd like me to take up that role, I would be more than happy to do so. And obviously there is the ongoing recommendations of the Child Poverty Task and Finish Group, which are going through, and obviously Worcestershire City Joint Strategic Needs Assessment is focusing on food poverty. So thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, I have Neil Lawrence, then I have Chris Mitchell, and then Steve Mackay. And then Louis Stevens. So, okay, so we'll do them in that order.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Lamb, for that report. especially for the fact that you highlighted the mental health problems stemming from COVID, and we're going to be seeing those for decades to come. I've spoken at full council a few months ago about the importance of having good mental health services, some of which I've tried to access recently myself, which exacerbates the mental health problems that I had in the first place. So thank you for laying emphasis on that. When I started my job at Worcester Technology College 11 years ago, this person, Matt Lamb, kept 16 to 18-year-olds, Matt Lamb, and I didn't want to because he just seemed so ridiculously famous, and I was jealous of him. I've never met him. The point I'm trying to make is this council is really, really lucky to have someone like Lamb to advocate for young people. We've just seen his enthusiasm in delivering that report, and I wish him more success in the role that he's clearly built to do. So thank you very much, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you very much. Chris Mitchell next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just a clarification point, really. I was scribbling furiously, but didn't get the time and date of the members' briefing for next Tuesday, because I have a grave concern that it's at the same time as the scheduled Conservative group meeting. So it may be that no Conservative group members turn up because it's a diary clash. But I might have misheard the time.
I noticed that in my diary. It is actually, so
which is a pity.
One thing we'll have to give Odlevino Conservatives there.
And as a word of advice, having been on the corporate members board for a whole year, corporate parents board, which I did thoroughly enjoy, it's a challenge, but it's a really rewarding challenge.
Yeah, Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Lamb, in relation to your report in one of the paragraphs there, 3, you note that CAMS has come under particular pressure with increased demands and reduced resources, quite right. Just wondered if you were aware about the tasking group under the auspices of the Children and Families Scrutiny Panel that's taking place at County at the present time, whether you want to tap into that at all. We've got dates coming up and such like, and there's been a few meetings already, but the number of stakeholders that are being asked to provide evidence in relation to it is quite significant.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Hodges next.
Thank you. It's very impressive in section 3 to see the number of meetings that you've had with different organisations in the short time that you've been our children and young people's champion. I just wanted to ask, in a totally non-aggressive way and through you, Mr. Mayor, whether what you see as the biggest challenge as far as children and young people are concerned for this council and for you as the members' champion in the next 12 months. You've listed some things here in looking ahead, but what would you say is the major challenge that we as a city council are going to face as far as young people are concerned?
Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, I genuinely think it is mental health and anxiety, because what I've noticed myself in my day-to-day job, and whenever I went to any of these organisations, I said, have you found it too? It's almost as young people's development has almost been sort of held back by 2 years. You know, the kind of behaviour I see on a day-to-day basis is the kind of behaviour you would normally associate with young people 2 years younger. And some of those social skills that students pick up when they interact with other people and they go to educational establishments has been sort of stopped, and students have developed lots of issues about anxiety, mental health issues, and it's about finding the resources. This is the issue. So I really think dealing with that, reassuring young people, finding the sort of resources in order to support them and help them, I think is incredibly important, because I think this is going to be an issue which is going to go through for the next sort of 4 or 5 years, to be honest with you, long after COVID is hopefully a distant memory.
Thank you. I've got Louise Stephen next, and then Louise Griffith afterwards.
Thank you. So I really very pleased to hear you talk about mental health. It's a very important thing. I've got a question though about the scope of the work, and I think when you have when you're the first person to do the champion, you're in a very privileged position in a way, because you sort of set the norms of what your sort of interest areas are going to be. And my question really is about participation of young people in democracy and involving them more in being active citizens and so on, and equipping them for the future. Now, this may well be something that's mission creep, and you've got to have the boundaries somewhere, I think, in the members' champion. But I thought that maybe in the future you've got so many other things that are very important, perhaps something to be considered for the role in the future.
I just respond to that, because obviously when I was appointed to the role, I had a relatively sort of thin job description, if you like, for want of a better word. And I remember saying to officers, I said, okay, right, what does this actually entail? And they said, well, you can make of it as you wish. And so I was like, okay, all right, fine. So I sort of, part of what I've been doing is is reaching out. And what I haven't had enough of actually is talking to actually young people. I have spoken to young people. I spoke to some primary kids yesterday. I spoke to kids at Nunnery Wood. But I've spoken to a lot of adults, a lot of teachers, a lot of head teachers, a lot of sort of police officers, etc. And that's really important as well. But I think what I need to do is talk to more young people, and I'll be doing a fresh sort of reaching out, because there were a number of schools, for example, Dines Green Primary School, we wrote to them and we didn't hear anything back, so those organisations I haven't yet been able to sort of speak to. I will be reaching out to them again and say, look, I'd love to come and speak to you. And obviously, there are youth groups, youth parliaments, etc., youth sort of consultation boards, actually hearing it from young people themselves is really important. Yesterday I said to the young people who quizzed me a lot, actually, I said, if you were going to change one thing about Worcester, what would it be? And trying to get a feel for what young people want, is incredibly important. And the best way of hearing it is from them themselves.
Thank you. And Louise Griffith.
Thanks. I'm really happy that you've taken on this role, Matt, because I know I suggested a few times that you might want to do it. I haven't not spoken to you about that, so I am happy that you did take it on. But we spent a year together working on the child poverty task and finish group, and I really can't think of anybody better to be a children and young persons champion at this council, given what you do for a day job, but also the passion that you have for it, and the fact that you've got so stuck in with such a wide variety of things. You raising issues about young people getting involved in democracy, looking at different schools, looking at mental health and how children fit into the Worcestershire-wide health and wellbeing strategy. So I think it's a really good report, and thank you so much for taking on the role.
Thank you very much. I see Councillor Norfolk. Oh, sorry, Councillor Olcott.
Chair, thank you. It is getting late, but I would very much like to echo Councillor Griffith's comments. You can see Councillor Lamb has clearly taken this on and essentially championed it and really sort of put a heart and soul into it. Thank you.
And Councillor Norfolk, do you have a comment as well?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the report, Matt. And I think that comes obvious from how you presented it to us, the passion you feel about the subject. Just wondering, on the subject of LGBT young people, whether you've had any experience or reports of anxiety specifically because of their sexuality.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting actually, because when I went to Nunnery Wood, and it wasn't a question I sort of asked specifically, but I did sort of say to them, are there any issues you're concerned about? And from what some young people said, there was clearly issues of sexuality and issues of identity that had come up. But what struck me was, in contrast to perhaps when I was young, when those kind of things were not tolerated in the way. I like to think that young people are far more tolerant of diversity in terms of sexuality, in terms of gender identity, than they were. So it was really interesting that in a room full of their peers, a couple of young people did sort of say, and they talked openly about that, and that was really encouraging actually. And I thought, oh God, that's really good. They have the confidence to be able to speak about it. So it is something that, again, I think we need to focus on if there are young people who do feel anxious. But I think that what I was struck by and pleased by was the tolerance there, was the tolerance and acceptance.
Councillor Udall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're in a very difficult time and a very difficult period in our history when poverty, economic deprivation and low income are causing huge problems for many of our communities. A lot of the young children tell me, especially in areas like Downs Green, where there's no bus provision for them to actually get out of the area, that they feel trapped in such communities and can't actually move and breathe properly. What kind of activity has he been aware of which has actually liberated those young people to get them out and about and to see new cultures, new communities and experience new areas for the first time?
Didn't some young people from Dines Green go to Barry Island thanks to the generosity of Councillor Udall, Councillor Norfolk and Councillor Lamb? Is that what you might be referring to? And I know we had wonderful feedback, and I know young people actually enjoyed it enormously. And of course, somebody very, very tellingly said it was the first time their son had ever seen the sea. So that was wonderful.
And I'm sure there were fans of Gavin and Stacey as well. So any more questions on this? If there's not, thank you very much, both of you, for giving your report and answering some robust questions. I'll now move on to Councillor Bayliss to ask is there anything that he is of the opinion that needs urgent consideration by the council.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we're next going to move
Mr.
into
Mayor.
Hold on.
Sorry, so on a point of order, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a personal statement, if you'd let me apologise to Councillor Hodgson for the way in which I tackled those questions. That was not my intention.
Thank you very much for that. We're now going to move on to item 12, which is item disclosure of exact information. There'll be a break for a few minutes while the members who aren't, people who aren't in here to hear this, leave, where they can go down there. I'm sure they could be looked after with wine and noodles. And we also need to turn off the internet.